Hello, friends, family, subscribers, and fellow researchers on this journey. Today I am going down to Pope's Creek, George Washington's birthplace. I have a meeting down there, and believe me, it doesn't take much to get me down there. I love walking the grounds and envisioning where my characters might have been. What it might have looked like for John Washington to sit in his parlor window and look left out into what at the time was a family cemetery where he had buried a wife, 2 children, and I suspect many more. When the colonial Danes interred the cemetery to update it for what would become George Washington's birthplace site, they found over 30 human remains, which confirms my suspicions that there were probably many other Washingtons and maybe even some Broadhursts and Bretts and Gerards in that cemetery. I love walking the grounds and imagining where exactly the shipwreck might occurred that left John there. I have a couple ideas in mind as far as where that might have occurred. I don't think the spot itself is in plain view from the George Washington birthplace site. I believe it's a little further up, closer to where currently Lee's Stratford Hall is. The reason I think that is because the Pope family had a plantation called the Cliffs Plantation, which is in part on the modern day grounds of what would become Stratford Hall by the Lees. The Lees didn't buy it directly from the Popes, but of the 2 Pope sons, Thomas moved to England and had his family there. Nathaniel Jr. stayed behind to build on his father's legacy. So when Thomas died, Thomas Pope in England, his wife wrote back and said, hey, sell the place. Someone else bought it at that time, and I think it was the Lees that bought it from them. So, boy, you know, I would love to just get an expedition together to explore the woods near all the creek areas of Upper Macadoc, Rosiers, Bridges, Maddox, because I think we would probably find the old foundations of a few of the early Anglican churches that were replaced when they reapportioned the districts. I think we would find remnants of Pope's Cliffs Plantation, which would expand the George Washington birthplace area, assuming the narrative at some point begins to incorporate some of George Washington's forebears, and it may not. You know, the way Washington sites work, they each focus in on the elements that they know to be sure of George. George was born at Pope's Creek, lived there till about age 3, then they moved largely to Ferry Farm, but first I think they moved over to the Mount Vernon property for a while when a house fire destroyed the house that was on Pope's Creek. So between Mount Vernon and Ferry Farm, George returns to Pope's Creek for a while in his teenage years. And it is true that he forms largely some of what would later be his great attributes like horsemanship and things like that. But, you know, there's so much room for expansion in the storytelling there. The Pope's Creek George Washington site was literally a stone's throw from the Arrowhead Native American community, which in peacetime engaged in open trade with the popes and all the families that lived on that large piece of land known originally as the Henry Brooks Patent, which was later apportioned to the various different families that would end up living there. But it's fascinating history, important history. I would love to see it told and interpreted there. So I'm excited to be going down there. When I go, I always take a moment to visit John's grave. And, you know, my religious beliefs separate here because we're humans. And when we've spent so much time getting to know a certain character, we kind of want to think that they're looking down on what we're doing and they're proud of it and they, you know, approve of it. And I wonder to myself, did I get you right, John? Did I get you right? Did I miss some stuff? You know, naturally in my mind, I think I got it right, and I think he would have been pleased. He was a good man in a lot of ways. You know, he was shaped by his upbringing and often acted contrary to the societal norms of his society because of his upbringing. I think he had a stronger sense of the idea of justice for more groups of people, even people of higher melanin. You know, you got to remember, in London as a young man, when he first became a merchant, it was nothing for him to see Swahilian traders, just like he saw Indian traders and European and Barbadoans. I mean, it was really a melting pot in London, and I'm not sure what the idea of ethnicity and propriety would have been at that time. There's a fascinating section of the book that deals with King Charles II's rise to power. Oliver Cromwell's interregnum ended. The first King Charles was beheaded. King Charles II rose, and after a period of timidity and gaining his footing, that's when he kind of went on the international offensive economically and started to stake out his claim. He infiltrated Africa based on mines and gold and things they had found in an attempt to undermine the Dutch, which meant kind of an unholy alliance between the English and Islam. Islam was the primary motivator of the African slave trade. They got to North Africa via the Holy Land Crusades from the time of the Reconquista, where the Moroccan Moors invaded Spain. It became Al-Andalus, and they contributed to the culture there for 700 years before they were run back out by Christians. But they remained strong in Africa, even though the Fifth Crusade took them to Damietta, Egypt, and they tried to destroy the Muslims, but it didn't happen. Again, during the Seventh Crusade, they tried to land in Alexandria, and a storm blew. So anyway, Africa became Muslim territory, and it wasn't just Arabic Muslim. It's important to note that. By the time of the 7th, 8th, and 9th Crusades, you know, the Arabic Muslims were the weak ones. The Mamluks, the Caucasoids, and Mongols were called Mamluk, and they had been pushed west by Genghis Khan during his, you know, unifying of China, and they became the ones in charge of Islam in Egypt for many, many years. Prior to the rise of the Ottoman Empire. So really, John Washington's story, just like any story in history, is the net result of all the world history that came before it, and it's fascinating. And then here's this little piece of land, Pope's Creek, George Washington's birthplace. If you have not been there, you gotta go. You gotta check it out. It's in the Mid-Atlantic region. It is near Colonial Beach, Virginia. And from the time you get down there, from the time you get within 20 miles of the place, the street names all involve land, plantations, businesses, towns that were present during John Washington's time. So it's literally like going back into time. Anyway, I'm excited today. I'll try to shoot some videos there and give you guys some updates and reports. Look forward to talking to you next time. Bye.